The next topic is sound mind. I would like you to revisit the definition of who can enter into contract. We said a person who has attained the age of majority, is of sound mind, is not disqualified. So the second point we said is of sound mind. First point we have already discussed, it is about majority, so we have discussed in length about it. Now the second point is of sound mind. What do you mean by sound mind? Sound mind means a sane mind, a logically functioning mind, a mind which can reason, which can understand. So, a person who can understand, who can reason, who can think, who can draw conclusions will be called as a person of sound mind. Do you think persons who are of unsound mind should be competent to contract? Or do you think persons of unsound mind should not be competent to contract? Only persons of sound mind should be competent to contract. Some people might think we should not distinguish between the two. That would be partiality or whatever. But the law says only persons of sound mind can make contracts. Now, why can persons of sound mind only can make contract? Why can't persons of unsound mind? Now, what do you mean by unsound mind? Let us first understand unsound mind first. Unsound mind means a person who cannot think properly, a person who cannot rationalize things, who cannot understand things, a person who cannot draw conclusions. In short, a person whose mental growth has been stopped, a mental growth has curtailed. We call them mad persons, we call them idiots, we call them lunatics. So, idiots are the persons whose mental growth was defective since the birth. Persons whose mental growth is defective or whose mental state is defective, we call them idiots. Who are lunatics? Lunatics are the persons whose mental growth or mental state wasn't deformative or defective since the birth. Gradually, as they grew up, probably their brain did not mature, their brain did not grow, the growth was hampered. Such persons are called lunatics. Idiots are believed to be never be able to become normal. However, lunatics can be treated and they can be made normal. So, person whose mental growth has been hampered are called as persons with unsound mind. Now, there can also be persons who are not lunatics, who are not idiots, yet they have an unsound mind. I'll give you the example of drunkards. Drunk people are not in their senses. They cannot think properly. They cannot judge properly. They cannot infer or imply properly. Their sense of thinking, their sense of making conclusions is hampered by the influence of alcohol on them. So, when they are in the state of drunkenness, they are not able to think, and this is the reason why they are called as persons of unsound mind. But please remember, these persons of unsound mind are only during the period in which they are drunk, in the state of drunkenness. However, when they are not drunk, they are perfectly normal. Likewise, persons who are physically ill, they are suffering from mental or bodily distress. They are suffering from some tensions, some stress, psychological or emotional stress, or possibly some physical illness, physical disease, something like cancer or acute body pain. Such persons would also be said to be not mentally in a condition to understand things, to rationalize things. So, all these three persons, persons whose mental growth is affected, second, persons who are drunk, third, persons who have some mental or bodily distress. All these three persons are called as persons of unsound mind. Now, do you think persons of unsound mind should be able to enter into contracts? I say no. Why? Because a person who should be able to make contracts should be capable of understanding. He should have the ability, he should have the potential to understand the contract. He should be able to understand why the contract is being made. What am I supposed to do under the contract? What would be my rights and liabilities in the contract? So these things he should be able to understand. At the same time, he should also be able to make a rational judgment. Now, what do you mean by rational judgment? Rational judgment means he should be able to draw conclusion as to if entering into the contract would be profitable to him or no, if it is in his favor or no, is it beneficial to him or no, or what kind of liabilities would he incur, will he be able to perform his promises, will he be able to honor the responsibilities or liabilities that he is undertaking. So he should be able to form rational judgment about these things. So I've given you 2 points. A person is called of sound mind who has the capacity to understand the contract. Second, who is able to make rational judgment about the contract. So person who's of unsound mind would not be able to understand the contract or would not be able to make a rational judgment. And this is why drunkards, lunatics, and persons who are physically ill are considered as persons of unsound mind, because their ability to think is hampered by some or the other reason. The ability to think, to understand, to form a rational judgment is hampered by lack of growth of the brain in case of lunatics. It is hampered by bodily distress if the person is physically ill. It is hampered by the influence of alcohol if he is a drunkard. So, in these cases, the ability of the person is hampered to understand the contract, to form a rational judgment because of some reason. So, these persons are called of unsound mind. Now, what do you think? Contracts with persons of unsound mind should be valid or should be void? Let's see. Contracts with a person of unsound mind is always void. please understand that he is a person of unsound mind. He does not know what he is contracting about. He does not know what his liabilities and rights are in the contract. He does not know if the contract is beneficial to him. He does not know what his interests are in the contract. He probably does not have the mental ability to think about these things. So the law says, when a person does not understand, when a person does not have the ability to make rational judgment about the contract, he is not making a contract actually. Because every contract requires consensus ad idem or consensus ad idem, which means consent at same. That means meeting of the minds. Both parties should consent with each other. Both parties should agree with each other. That means what the first party knows what the contract is about, it knows what the second party is asking it to perform, it also knows what its rights are under the contract. At the same time, the second party also knows what the contract is about, what the first party is asking this party to do, and what this party has as rights under the contract. So, when they both know completely about the contract, we can say that consensus ad idem exists. Consensus ad idem also means meeting of minds. Both the minds are meeting, they both are agreeing with each other. However, if you contract with a drunkard, he may sign a contract, but he does not know what the contract is about because he is influenced by alcohol. So, his capacity to understand the contract, his capacity to rationalize the contract is hurt. So, if he is signing a contract under such a state, the law says there is no consensus ad idem because he was not in his senses. He couldn't think properly. He couldn't understand the contract properly. Thus, the contract will be considered as void due to lack of consensus ad idem. However, do you think all contracts with lunatics or persons who are physically ill or drunkards are void? What if the person is not in a state of drunkenness 24 hours? He might be in a state of drunkenness for, let's say, for 5 to 6 hours only. What about the rest 18 hours? Can he contract in those 18 hours? What about lunatics? Let's say they are not lunatics or they are not mad always. They get fits or they are normal in in intervals. Let's say for every 2-3 hours only in a day a person becomes lunatic. For the rest of the day he is pretty much normal. So do you think he can enter into contracts during those periods of time when he is perfectly normal, when he is not lunatic? Let's see. If the person is of occasionally, he's occasionally of unsound mind. He is not of unsound mind permanently. That is, the unsoundness of mind comes and goes, comes and goes. There are intervals of normalcies. Again, there is an interval of lunacy. Again, there is an interval of normalcy. Then there is a interval of lunacy. So in intervals he is lunatic. In intervals he is normal. So can he enter into contracts during those periods of time when he is normal? Yes, he can. He can only be barred from making a contract when he is of unsound mind. However, during the periods when he is of sound mind, he can always make a contract. So during the periods of time when he is normal, when he can think, when he can rationalize a contract, he can always make a contract. This is very important. Please understand that a person who becomes unsound during intervals or who's of occasionally of unsound mind, he cannot make a contract only when he is of unsound mind. At other times, he is free to make contracts. The same case applies to drunkards also. Drunkards, when not under the influence of alcohol, can make contracts. However, when they are under the influence of alcohol, they cannot make contracts.